Welcome back to RunThrough TV. It is Ben Sheppard here. Sometimes when you do what I do, you get an opportunity to interview somebody that truly inspires you, somebody who you followed for a very long time, and somebody that you could really only have dreamt of interviewing. Lucy Charles-Barclay, for me, is one of those people. Her story is brilliant, from her swimming background to now becoming one of the greatest living triathletes on earth. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Honestly, I could have probably made it a feature film length because I just love chatting to Lucy. She was brilliant. And if at any point you do enjoy it, please do make sure you do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RunThrough TV as well. Without further ado, let's get stuck into this conversation, which I'm so excited for you to see, with Lucy Charles-Barclay.
I'm Lucy Charles-Barclay. I'm a professional triathlete. Used to be a swimmer growing up. I'm now a 70.3 world champion in the Ironman Triathlon, multiple Ironman and 70.3 Ironman winner, and yeah, just living my best life being a triathlete.
How did the journey into athletics begin then, I guess? You mentioned that you started as a swimmer, but what was that journey from being a kid to becoming a swimmer and then onto triathlon?
Yeah, so I think I was just really lucky that my parents were super active. So myself and my sister as kids, we always would go swimming on the weekend, or we had mountain bikes, so we'd go out cycling together. We just live a really active, fun lifestyle. And I think as young as maybe 8 or 9, I was watching the Olympic Games on the telly, and I kind of was saying to my mum and dad, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And at that age, I just started getting into swimming, and I loved it and was super competitive even as a really young kid, but also had this crazy desire to always do the hardest event that there was. So in swimming, to begin with, as a 9-year-old, I wanted to swim the 200 butterfly, which no one wants to swim. It's a really, really hard event, and I did that at that age. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, I think the longer the distance, the harder it is. So I started to get into doing the distance swimming, and eventually trying to make the marathon swim in the London Olympics. That was what I was trying to do, and narrowly missed out on that. And then after we had our home Olympics, which I guess as a kid was like the ultimate dream, was to be in the home Olympic Games. Once I missed out on that, I was like, what do I do now? So I actually quit sport altogether, and I started working at a wildlife park called Paradise Wildlife Park, which is in Hertfordshire, if anyone knows it. I worked there for a little while. I was part of their social media and marketing team, and helped out where I could with that. And then whilst I was working there, I missed that kind of competitiveness, the need to train for something, and that kind of day-to-day commitment to a training plan. So whilst I was working there, my now husband and we signed up for an Ironman triathlon, not really knowing what we was getting in for. We didn't own anything other than a mountain bike. At first we thought that would be fine to do a triathlon on. Soon realised that you're never going to finish an Ironman on a mountain bike. And I don't actually know if you're allowed to do it on a mountain bike. So we kind of learned about what it was, invested in some equipment, got some second-hand road bikes, and then about a month before got a time trial bike, which I wouldn't recommend doing because we hadn't had much practice on them. But we finished that first Ironman triathlon, both of us, and was just hooked on the sport. And I guess from something that went from trying to just be a really fun challenge, it's now become both of our careers. And we never could have imagined that at the beginning when we signed up for that first Ironman, that actually we'd be doing pretty well and on a world stage. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey to get to this point for sure.
I think doing pretty well is probably playing it down slightly, to be fair. When was that realization that, oh, okay, like I'm actually pretty good at this and this could become a profession and a career?
I think to begin with, I was doing quite well in races where I was still working full-time at the zoo, and also I was trying to set up a personal training business with my husband Reese. So we were training alongside that and kind of doing pretty well. I would go obviously to triathlon, and my swim background would help me massively. I'd always come out of the water first, but then I'd usually get overtaken on the bike and then maybe gain a couple of places back on the run. So I was like, I'm doing pretty well, and I know that I could train a lot better for this than I am currently. And when we went and did the first Ironman, I think I finished second in my age group, and we kind of found out what Kona was and what the World Championships was at the awards ceremony. And I remember sitting there thinking, I want to go to that next year. So I'm going to commit myself and train really, really hard and see if I can get that age group World Championship slot for the following year, which I went on to do and went on to win my age group. And then I kind of had done that in the space of 2 years of doing the sport. And I was like, well, what now? I guess the only real thing I can do is go professional in order to have a bigger, more scary goal. So I applied for my professional license and then started racing professionally in 2016. And then in 2017, actually went on to come second at the World Championships as a professional. So it was a real fast journey to get into that point. A lot of hard work went into it once I kind of, that year that I decided to really, really work hard was in 2017, when I was like, I feel like I could actually have a shot at this being my real career and making some money as a triathlete. So I think it was around April 2017, I had a really good result on the professional level. And I remember going home and telling all of my personal training clients that I was going to give this a shot. I was going to see if I could make it as a professional triathlete. And all of them were incredibly supportive. They were like, you know what, Lucy, if it doesn't work out, we're all still going to be here. You can come back, keep coaching us, keep training us. So that was really, really lovely. And I've always had that at the back of my mind, that I loved personal training, and it's the perfect fallback. If this all was gone tomorrow, I would love to go back and do that. So yeah, it's nice to have that as a plan B, I think. But yeah, I never could have imagined being where I am now kind of a few years ago. So it has been a really crazy journey.
Was that a difficult decision to make, or was it something you were just like super motivated to do? Was it a bit scary or not?
Yeah, it definitely was quite scary, because I remember at the time I was living at home and I was kind of struggling to make ends meet as a triathlete. It is an expensive sport with all of the equipment you need, traveling the world. It isn't cheap. So I remember thinking, like, this has to work, otherwise I'm not going to have the money to fund this career. So it meant that I did just go all in. I was like, I've got to commit 100% to make this work, to the training that I need to do. And it took me back to being a swimmer, where it was a full commitment to a program of swimming in the evening, going to school day, and then swimming in the evening after school. It felt like that again, with a full commitment to what I was doing. And I knew I could do it because I'd done it before growing up. But this time there was more implications, because financially I had to support myself. I wasn't going to ask my parents to drive me to training and back and support everything. So it was a real gamble, I guess. But I knew that, because obviously my husband was doing it as well, with both of us committing fully to what we were doing, that hopefully we were going to be successful. And kind of sat here now, I feel like we definitely have been successful, and all of the hard work has definitely been worth it. Do
you feel like being a swimmer growing up, that instills the work ethic that you've now got in terms of training for the three disciplines?
Yeah, absolutely. Swimming is a really, really tough sport. I mean, when you're a kid and you're setting an alarm for 5 a.m. to go and train before you've got a full day at school, it is absolutely brutal. And it's a tough sport in that you can't exactly socialise whilst you're swimming, and you're underwater, all of that. So it can be quite a kind of solitary sport, and the commitment that's required to actually compete at a high level is so tough. So I actually feel like now, coming into triathlon, where I'm only doing it because I want to do it. I have a program, but when you're cycling and running, you can be very social. You can be talking, and it's outdoors, and it's a lot more fun. So I think that was the real appeal for triathlon for me, was having the variety of free sports, also doing some gym work. So you really do get variety in your training, and that was definitely something that I enjoyed, having come from swimming, which is an incredibly tough sport.
And it's almost like your superpower in triathlon now. Obviously, your run and your bike are incredible as well. But like I was watching one of Lionel's YouTube videos the other day, and he actually just cited you at the start of the YouTube video, just being like, "Well, he's always calling himself a terrible swimmer, isn't he? I'm a terrible swimmer compared to maybe the other men in the field at the moment. You've got to be that A-star swimmer. You've got to be a Lucy Charles-Barclay. Does it feel like that kind of is your superpower, and starting with that and always coming out of the water first, that must be something that kind of gives you a lot of confidence going into races.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think it's only been in the last year or so that I've sort of thought about it from the other athlete's perspective. I've always thought about it from my own perspective of, right, I want to be first out the water, I want to get as much of a gap as possible, but I've never actually felt about the mental impact that probably has on the athletes that I'm against, where they're instantly on the back foot, and when they get out the swim they're being told, oh, it's 5 minutes or it's 10 minutes, and I've never really thought how that would affect their race. I've always been thinking, right, they're chasing me, I've got to get this gap and see how much of a gap I can get. But yeah, I would definitely say it's my superpower. I feel like I've worked incredibly hard to have it. I've been a swimmer since I was around 8-9 years old. I've been swimming for nearly 20 years now. So it's taken a lot of time to get to this level. And obviously the girls are constantly trying to improve and close that gap down. And it becomes tough because I'm like, do I now invest more time into my swim to try and pull it back to even closer to the level it was when I was a swimmer? Or do I invest my time into continually trying to improve my cycling and my running? And I guess that's the fun of triathlon. You are deciding, where do I put my effort in? Where do I try and gain my advantage? And it's becoming more and more tactical as the level rises. And in the last few years, the female field has just gone from strength to strength. And we have different avenues for racing now with different circuits happening and more exposure and prize money in the sport. So that's only going to raise the bar, and it is exciting. It just means we have to work even harder to stay at the top. So yeah, it's very exciting for our sport.
You mentioned like more avenues with the PTO and things coming in like that. What difference does that make to you as a professional triathlete?
Oh, it's absolutely huge. I think the PTO came in at the most perfect time, really. We had the pandemic and everything was really, really tough as athletes for us to even make a living, and they supported us. And now we're obviously back to normal, which is amazing, and bringing in more and more races and more coverage to our sport. And next year's looking super exciting. I think there's going to be more racing available to us in the PTO circuit. It also means that the other race organisers like Ironman have to up their game if they want us to go to their races, because the incentive is so high to race in the PTO races, that why would we actually go and do an Ironman that is so much harder when actually the prize money is less and the coverage could be less. So we're already seeing Ironman up their game to try and match the coverage that PTO offers, but it's only going to raise the bar for our sport in terms of obviously the athlete performance, but the coverage and the prize money as well. So yeah, the future of triathlon is looking pretty good at the moment.
And from when you started to kind of now, in terms of coverage, I think a lot of it is thanks to the athletes, actually, with avenues like YouTube and social media and stuff, and athletes putting themselves out a little bit more. What does it feel like being in it in terms of the eyes on the sport? Does it now feel like there are more eyes on the sport?
Yeah, it's a real interesting dynamic I find with my own kind of coverage, is that obviously I have a large audience. We've really worked on that over the years and enjoyed sharing our journey using YouTube, and we're seeing a lot more athletes doing that now because they're seeing the benefit of it. Sponsors love it. It helps them get coverage as well. But also for me personally, I always find that when I'm actually abroad or at races, I have all the fans, I get all the attention, but usually then I come back home to the UK and no one knows who I am. I don't really get the media coverage at home. So it's a nice balance in some ways, because it can be a bit overwhelming when I go to races and there's so many people who want to come and say hello or have a photo, but actually then coming home, it can be quite nice because I get completely left alone to do my training and walk down the street and no one cares who I am. So it's quite humbling in a way. I do find it quite nice.
Do you ever find it difficult to switch off when you come home? Because obviously yourself and Reese, you're both triathletes, you live and breathe it. Do you ever find it difficult to kind of take a step back and kind of just have a moment?
Sometimes I think when we're in very heavy training, I mean, that becomes our entire life with the volume of training you have to do these distances that we race. But we also, in this time of the year where we're having a bit of downtime, it's quite nice. We have some amazing friends who live near us. We live near London, so we can go into the city. We've got 2 dogs now. We just recently got a new puppy. So they are the perfect distraction from triathlon. Just we live on the edge of a really nice forest. We just go and walk the dogs in there and just switch off. So we have our methods for switching off from triathlon, because it definitely becomes very overwhelming when the season kicks off and we're traveling and training all the time. It does take over your whole life.
And it's becoming more and more scientific, the training now, than it has been in the past. How do you go about sort of implementing some of them new scientific methods into your training?
Yeah, it's definitely moving forward with the science triathlon, and I'm quite lucky because Reece actually studied sports science at university, so he's always had a huge interest in that. He's always been reading the latest leading research in what we should do in terms of training, so he's always been amazing at that. I also started working with Dan Lorang last year, who has a huge amount of knowledge, and we kind of are always tapping into the different science that we can to improve my training and kind of get those marginal gains that are so important. So I think it will play a big factor over the next few years, that if you're an athlete that isn't maybe doing those scientific things, then potentially you're just going to fall behind the athletes that are. I think that's where our sport is going, that it is just moving forward at rapid rates.
Give someone a little bit of an insight. Say we are 6 weeks out of Kona. What does a normal training week look like for 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, marathon?
So I'd say on average, when I'm in a heavy training block, I'm doing a minimum of 30 hours of training a week. I usually will swim nearly every single day. I just find I get so much from doing that, not just keeping my swim at the level that it is, but also helping with my fitness across everything. So that I will swim quite a lot. That's usually a minimum of about 30 kilometers a week, which sounds like a lot, but as a swimmer, I'd be doing upwards of 75, 80 kilometers a week. So it's quite a lot less than that, but obviously I didn't have to bike and run at the time. Cycling, I'm probably doing around kind of a minimum of 10 hours a week, but up to 20 hours a week on the big weeks, especially when I go abroad and train somewhere like Club Santa in Lanzarote. I can get out and ride, and there's less cars on the road, so we can do the large volume of cycling that is required. And then in terms of running, I think my running volume is maybe on the lower side of some athletes. So I'm looking around, on average, maybe 50 to 60 kilometers a week. If I go more than that, then I feel like I'm at more of a risk of injury. So we do try and just keep the running lower but consistent. I am an athlete that responds really well to high intensity training. So even though I'm an endurance athlete, I get a lot from training at high intensities. I think that is probably from my swim background, where yes, I was a 1500 to marathon swimmer, but our training was very intense. So I do get a lot from doing intensity. And I think that's probably why I have been able last year to do some of the shorter distance racing and the longer distance, because I have that crossover in the way that I train. So maybe my training is slightly different to some of the other long distance athletes out there.
Looking back at last season then, and then looking forward to next season, what would you say were the highlights of last season for you?
So I'd say the biggest highlight was obviously my first race back from the injury, having the big injury at the start of the year. I had a stress fracture in my femoral neck. So I remember being told around March time that my whole season was pretty much, I needed to look at next year rather than focus on this one. They said that was a smart thing to do. So the biggest highlight for me was definitely coming back and winning the world title at the long distance championships in Slovakia, because I hadn't been training for that long at that point. I felt like I was ready to race, but I didn't feel like I was going to put down a performance like I did. So that was the biggest highlight, just putting the injury behind me and being like, I'm back racing now, doing what I love doing. It was also amazing to get back to Kona after such a long break because of COVID and not being able to travel to the big island for the World Championships there. So coming second there again was bittersweet in a way. It was tough because I obviously want to get the win there. It's the fourth time I've been second, but at the same time, I didn't think I would be there because of the injury. And actually to still come second despite all of the setbacks this year was amazing. And it actually felt like my strongest performance I'd had there. I felt consistent over the whole day. I didn't feel like I faded on the run like maybe I have done before. So the future is exciting for me in that race. I feel like we're really getting somewhere with that, and I feel more confident than ever that I can win that race. I think that was really good. So yeah, I'd say they were my two highlights of the year. To actually get 4 races in the space of 3 months after the injury was incredible as well. So I'm definitely excited for next year, and I feel like I won't make the same mistakes that I did maybe at this time last year when I was having a break. I feel like we're learning from those mistakes, and hopefully, touch wood, there won't be any injuries or setbacks next year.
I'm touching wood as well. You mentioned the injury, and I was something I wanted to get onto. As somebody that has trained for their whole life, and somebody who that's inherently built into their psyche, what is it like when you get that right? You might actually have to take a season off here. Like, how do you deal with that mentally?
Yeah, it's incredibly tough, and I think the best way I would describe it is a bit like how everyone felt during the pandemic, where you kind of feel like the rug's taken from underneath you. You don't know what your next goal is. You don't know what you're working towards. You're kind of just out of it. And actually, it is really tough, because as an athlete, you're always looking for that next goal. And when I had so many big goals this year, to have all of them taken away was incredibly tough. And you go through that period where you almost feel depressed because you haven't got that thing that you work towards. And quite quickly I was like, right, I can't wallow in this sadness of this injury. I have to focus on the only thing that I can, which is fixing this injury in the best way. So all of my energy went into, right, number one, fixing it, learning why it happened, and then making sure it doesn't happen again, and then actually coming back stronger from the injury, learning from it. So I was incredibly lucky that I had an amazing team at Red Bull. They flew me out to their athlete performance center, which is in Austria, and we just dived into everything. We made sure that this injury wasn't going to come back, and I was going to be stronger for it ever happening. And I definitely do feel stronger, and a lot of that I think is actually maybe mentally than more so than physically. So yeah, I do feel confident that we've learned a lot, and hopefully going forward these things won't happen again. But also, if they do, we know exactly how to deal with them and how to fast track that recovery. So yeah, I am incredibly thankful that the team around me helped me come back so quickly.
And it was lovely to have you a couple of weekends back at Run Alton Towers as well, taking the victory for the second time. It's a fun race, isn't it? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, it's such a fun race. I did it last year with all the family and some friends, and as soon as we'd done it and we enjoyed the weekend, obviously doing the run and then going in the theme park is such a unique experience. And after we did it last year, all of the family were like, we want to do it again next year. So that was kind of my Christmas present to all of them, was that I'd signed them up to do it the following year. So they were committed. They knew they had to do it. But yeah, it's a great run. It's so different to anything I've done before. I've never run around a theme park before. And actually this year was great because with less restrictions, it just felt like there were so many more people supporting the event and as well as running it. So yeah, we loved it. We had a great experience. We had a bit of a competition going on as well, which my sister at the moment is working on a vlog for the event and what we did. But we had a little bit of a competition going on because we are super competitive as a family. So I won't give too much away, but my sister's working on the video at the moment, and I think it's going to be a really fun one.
Well, we'll make sure we share that as soon as it's out. And that must be not quite nice, actually, like having your sister involved with the YouTube channel as well. And also having the YouTube, I know we've mentioned it briefly, but it kind of brings a slightly different element to day-to-day training as well. If you are vlogging or you are making a video, it's something a little bit different to kind of bring into what I'm imagining from time to time can become quite monotonous. So is that something you enjoy doing?
Yeah, we do really enjoy doing the YouTube, and I think one of our key, I guess, fundamentals for Reese and I when we came into triathlon was trying to keep the training as fun as possible, despite the fact we have to do so much, is how can we add an element of fun? So we both are super competitive, so we like to do these YouTube videos where maybe there's an element of competition between Reese and myself, or we just kind of sit down together and say, okay, how can we make a fun video out of this crazy session that we've got to do? So it does add a little bit of an element of fun, and yeah, anyone who follows our channel will hopefully see that we do have a good time most of the time. We work incredibly hard, but we try to make it fun where we can.
And finally, like for somebody watching this, obviously you're one of the most decorated athletes in the UK. They'll be sitting here thinking, oh, I could never do something like this. I could never get fit. I could never become athletic. Like, what would be your advice to them? And what has a life of athletics and different sports, what is it given you?
Yeah, I think even with my training now, when I have a bit of a break from training, the hardest thing is getting started. And I think that's true to anyone who maybe wants to get fit or kind of change their lifestyle, make it a bit healthier. The hardest thing is actually just getting on that road to starting. And once you're started and you're in it, it's quite easy because you're on a roll, you're committed to doing it. And when you have like a streak of working out maybe every single day, you don't want to break that. So just getting started is the hardest part. And especially this time of year, it's dark, it's cold, you get home from work and the last thing you want to do is get out the door and run. And actually the hardest thing is getting out the door. Once you're out there, you can actually enjoy it. Like most of the time I do, but then even if you don't enjoy it that much, the second you get back in the door after you've done the workout, you just feel amazing, you just feel great. So yeah, that would be the first thing I would say, is just try and get started. And I think the nice thing with running or triathlon is it's quite a community-led sport. So there's always going to be a local club you can join or rope your friends into going for a run or a ride with you. Like, the more people you're doing it with, the easier it is. So that's definitely kind of my advice for getting going. And actually, sport has taught me so much. I think I couldn't really begin to tell you everything, but it's just taught me to be dedicated to something. And the easiest thing and way to be dedicated to something is setting a goal. And it doesn't need to be a massive goal, but if you haven't got goals, it's difficult to know why you're doing it. So even me now, yes, I know I want to win this race or this one, but if I don't have small goals in the middle, I still find it hard to work towards that big one. So setting yourself smaller, more achievable goals makes it easier to reach that big one at the end.
A big thank you to Lucy for coming on RunThrough TV. Make sure you go and watch her Alton Towers video, by the way, as well. It's so much fun. I've linked it in the description of this chat. Give this video a thumbs up as well, and please subscribe here on RunThrough TV as well. We had a little look in some of the analytics, and there are a lot of you watching this right now that aren't subscribed, so do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Give us the gift of an extra subscriber this Christmas. I will catch you again very soon here on RunThrough TV.